I should have known something was wrong when Amber started practicing her lines in the shower. Not just humming or singing like most people do, but full theatrical projection, clear enunciation, dramatic pauses, the works. At first, I thought it was charming. My wife, the former drama teacher turned corporate communications director, still passionate about her craft at 35. "Honey, you're going to wake the neighbors," I'd call through the bathroom door, laughing. "Sorry," she'd call back, but the projection never really stopped. If anything, it got more intense. We'd been married 6 years, together for 8. I'm Ryan Fitzgerald, 38, and I work in cybersecurity consulting, the kind of job that keeps me traveling 3 weeks out of every month, usually to Phoenix for our biggest client. Amber and I met at a community theater production where I was designing sets and she was playing Lady Macbeth. Even then, she had this ability to slip in and out of character so seamlessly that sometimes I wasn't sure which version of her I was talking to. Our Denver townhouse reflected both our personalities, my methodical attention to detail in the built-in shelving and hidden cable management, her dramatic flair in the bold color choices and theatrical posters lining the hallway. We'd talked about kids, but Amber always had a reason to wait. Just one more promotion. Or, let me finish this project first. Or, maybe after the spring play season. The spring play season. That's where this all started. I got the part. Amber burst through the front door on a Tuesday evening in February, practically vibrating with excitement. "Nora in a dollhouse. Can you believe it?" I looked up from my laptop where I'd been reviewing security protocols for the Phoenix client. "That's fantastic. When do rehearsals start?" "Next week. Blake Harrison is directing. He's this amazing creative mind who just moved here from Chicago. He's revolutionizing the whole theater scene here." Her eyes sparkled in that way they did when she talked about really good productions. "This is going to be incredible, Ryan. I can feel it." I closed the laptop and pulled her into a hug. "I'm proud of you. Nora's a great role. The woman who leaves her husband for her own independence," she said, striking a dramatic pose. Very fitting for today's political climate. At the time, I thought that was just Amber being Amber, always finding the deeper meaning, the social relevance. I supported her artistic pursuits completely. How could I not? When we met, she'd helped me understand that technical work and creative work weren't opposites. They were different languages for solving problems. The rehearsal schedule was intense from the start. Monday, Wednesday, and Friday evenings, plus Saturday afternoons. Sometimes Sunday too, depending on what Blake needed. Amber would leave right after dinner, still in her work clothes, but with her hair pulled back in that specific way she did when she was getting into character. "How's it going with the new director?" I asked one evening as she gathered her script and water bottle. "Blake's a perfectionist," she said, not looking at me directly. "He makes us work through every moment until it's absolutely right. Sometimes we go pretty late." "How late?" 10, 11 sometimes. You know how it is with community theater. Everyone has day jobs, so we have to make the evening hours count. I did know how it was. I'd been involved in enough productions to understand the commitment. Still, something felt different this time. Amber seemed more secretive wasn't the right word. Guarded, maybe. March rolled in with an unusual warm spell, and Amber started going to the gym before work. She joined a new place called Peak Fitness, closer to her office. "Trying to get in shape for the role?" I asked, watching her stuff workout clothes into a new athletic bag I'd never seen before. "Blake wants all the actors to be physically present," she said. "Nora has to be vital, energetic. Plus, the new gym has better equipment than our old place. She wasn't wrong about being physically present. Amber had always been beautiful, but lately she seemed to glow. New haircut, subtle changes in makeup, clothes that fit differently. I attributed it to the confidence that comes with a challenging role. The wardrobe updates started in late March. Nothing dramatic. A new blazer here, different jeans there. When I complimented a particularly stunning dress she wore to one of her networking events, she deflected. This old thing? I've had it forever. I could have sworn I'd never seen it before, but I travel so much that I miss things. Maybe she'd been saving it for special occasions. The networking events were new too. Industry connections, she explained. Blake's introducing me to some people in regional theater. You never know where it might lead. Blake Harrison. His name came up more and more frequently. Blake thinks this. Blake says that. Blake has this brilliant interpretation of Ibsen's feminist themes. I looked him up online. Real estate agent, recently divorced, profile photos that screamed creative type, with the artfully messy hair and expensive casual wear. He seems interesting, I said carefully one evening. He's completely transformed how I think about character development, Amber replied, her voice taking on that dreamy quality she usually reserved for discussing great performances she'd seen. He understands the craft in a way most community theater directors just don't. I nodded and went back to my laptop. My Phoenix client was demanding more of my time, and I had bigger concerns than my wife's enthusiasm for her director. If anything, I was happy she'd found someone who could challenge her artistically. The late nights became more frequent. Amber would come home around 11:30 or midnight, usually claiming they'd worked through a particularly difficult scene. How's the play coming together? I'd ask. Blake's method is very intensive, she'd say, heading straight for the shower. We're really diving deep into the psychological realism. The shower performances got longer too. 15, 20 minutes of what sounded like line practice. I could hear fragments through the bathroom door. Emotional delivery, different inflections, repetition of the same phrases with varying intensity. In April, my Phoenix schedule intensified. The client was implementing a major security overhaul, and I was spending 4 days a week on site, flying back to Denver Thursday evening and leaving again Monday morning. Amber seemed almost relieved when I told her about the extended travel. That's actually perfect timing, she said. We're getting into the really intensive rehearsal phase. Blake wants us to live and breathe these characters. Just don't lose yourself completely, I said, kissing her goodbye at the airport. I like the real Amber, too. She laughed, but something flickered across her face. Too quick for me to interpret. While I was in Phoenix, we'd text throughout the day like always. Good morning messages, photos of interesting cloud formations or funny signs, the little intimacies that keep you connected across distance. But our phone calls became shorter and less frequent. How was rehearsal? I'd ask during our evening check-ins. Exhausting but good, she'd say. Blake's really pushing us. I need to run through my lines a few more times before bed. Sometimes I could hear her in the background even during our calls, muttering dialogue, practicing inflections. She was certainly dedicated. The first week of May, my Phoenix client canceled a crucial meeting at the last minute. Something about their CEO being in emergency board sessions. Rather than extend my stay by 2 days to reschedule, I decided to fly home early and surprise Amber. Maybe we could have a romantic evening before she had to leave for rehearsal. I caught the 2:15 p.m. flight instead of my usual Thursday red-eye, landing in Denver at 4:10. By 4:30, I was pulling into our driveway, already planning how I'd surprise her. Her car was there, which was odd. Rehearsals didn't start until 7, and she usually came home first to change and grab dinner. Maybe Blake had canceled tonight's session. Maybe we could actually have that romantic evening I'd been planning. I was fishing for my keys when I heard her voice through the slightly open living room window. That distinctive theatrical projection, the same one I'd been hearing through the bathroom door for months. But there was something different about it. More emotional intensity, more personal. I paused with my hand on the doorknob. It would be rude to interrupt if she was running lines with someone. I'd wait a moment for her scene partner to respond. But no other voice came. Curious, I moved closer to the window. The angle let me see into our living room without being visible from inside. Amber was alone, pacing back and forth in front of our couch, script in hand. But she wasn't reading from it. She was speaking from memory, with the kind of emotional conviction that only comes from deep rehearsal. "I can't wait to leave him," she said, her voice carrying that perfect theatrical clarity that could reach the back row of any auditorium. "Just a few more months of pretending, and then I'll be free." I froze. That wasn't a line from A Dollhouse. I knew that play well enough to be sure. She paused, took a breath, and started again with a different approach, more sympathetic this time. "Ryan, I'm leaving you for someone else. I've been planning this for over a year now, and I can't keep living this lie." The words hit me like a physical blow. Ryan. My name. She was practicing leaving me? My hands were shaking as I fumbled for my phone, hitting record. This couldn't be real. This had to be some kind of acting exercise, some method preparation I didn't understand. "I know this will hurt you," she continued, pacing to the window and back. "But I've found someone who understands me in ways you never could. Someone who sees my artistic soul." She paused again, shook her head, and tried a different emotional approach, colder this time, more matter-of-fact. "Ryan, I'm leaving you for another man. His name is Blake, and we've been together for over a year. I want a divorce." Blake? The director? Of course. I watched my wife of 6 years practice destroying our marriage like it was a monologue audition. She tried different wordings, different emotional beats, timing her pauses for maximum impact. It was a performance, but not the kind I'd thought. "Should I tell him about the baby?" she said to herself, stopping mid-pace. "Blake thinks I should wait until after the divorce is final, but baby? What baby?" She started again, this time incorporating that detail. "Ryan, I'm leaving you for Blake. I'm also pregnant, and the timing, well, you'll figure it out." I recorded for almost 10 minutes, watching her workshopping the end of our marriage with the same dedication she'd once brought to Lady Macbeth. Multiple versions, different emotional approaches considering various ways to reveal information. It was methodical, professional. When she seemed to be wrapping up her practice session, I quietly backed away from the window, got in my car, and drove around the block 3 times before parking and walking normally to the front door. "Honey, I'm home," I called out, using my keys loudly enough to give her time to transition back to whoever she needed to be for me. "Ryan." She appeared in the living room doorway, slightly flushed but smiling. "You're home early. How was Phoenix?" "Client meeting got canceled, so I caught an earlier flight." I kissed her cheek, studying her face for any sign of the woman I'd just watched. "What are you up to?" Just running through some lines for tonight's rehearsal, she said, gesturing toward her script on the coffee table. Blake wants us to be completely off book by next week. The lie came so easily. She'd probably been lying for months. How's the play coming together? I asked, the same question I'd been asking for weeks, but now with different intent. Really well. Blake's vision is finally starting to coalesce. He has us exploring some very raw emotional territory. She moved to the kitchen, not quite meeting my eyes. Are you hungry? I could make something quick before I have to leave. That would be great. I followed her, my mind racing. This Blake guy sounds pretty intense. What's his background again? Chicago theater scene, she said, pulling ingredients from the refrigerator. He's worked with some really prestigious companies. Very avant-garde approach to classical texts. More lies. I'd looked him up. Blake Harrison sold houses and had been divorced for 3 months. Unless he'd been running some kind of underground theater collective between real estate showings, his prestigious background was fiction. Must be nice to work with someone who really gets your artistic process, I said carefully. It is. For the first time, her smile seemed genuine. He sees potential in me that I didn't even know I had. I'll bet he does. Amber made grilled cheese and tomato soup, comfort food from our early dating days, while chattering about various cast members and their character interpretations. All fiction, I now realized. She was improvising an entire theatrical production to cover for… What? How long had this been going on? I should probably head out soon, she said, glancing at the clock. Blake likes us there a few minutes early to get into the right headspace. Of course. I smiled and nodded like the supportive husband I'd been for months. Break a leg tonight. After she left, I sat in our living room where she'd been rehearsing my abandonment, staring at my phone. The video was all there. Clear audio, her face visible, my name spoken multiple times. Evidence of premeditation that would have made any divorce attorney salivate. But mostly, I just felt hollow. I'd supported her artistic dreams, given her space to grow, trusted her completely. And she'd used all of it, my travels, my support, even my understanding of theater to choreograph our ending. The baby comment echoed in my head. She was pregnant? When? With whom? The timeline implications made my stomach turn. That night, I barely slept. Every sound made me wonder if it was Amber coming home from her rehearsal with Blake. She finally walked in at 11:47 p.m., and I pretended to be asleep as she showered. Another long session with what I now knew wasn't line practice. The next morning, she was already gone when I woke up. A note on the kitchen counter. Early meeting, then gym. See you tonight. XOXOA. I spent the day researching. Blake Harrison, licensed real estate agent, divorced March 15th from Jennifer Harrison after 12 years of marriage. No theater credits anywhere online. LinkedIn showed him selling luxury properties in the Cherry Creek area, where he'd been for 8 years. No mysterious Chicago theater background. No prestigious companies. No avant-garde classical interpretations. Just a real estate agent who'd convinced my wife to rehearse leaving me. The pregnancy question gnawed at me. If Amber was pregnant, when had it happened? We'd been trying on and off for years, but she'd always found reasons to delay seriously attempting. Work stress, wrong timing, wanting to wait until after this project or that promotion. But if she'd been with Blake for over a year, as her rehearsal suggested, I searched our bathroom more carefully than I'd ever searched any client's network for security vulnerabilities. In the back of her makeup drawer, behind products I'd never seen her use, I found it. A positive pregnancy test dated 6 weeks ago. 6 weeks. I tried to remember our last intimate night together. It had been over 2 months ago, before my Phoenix travel schedule intensified, before her intensive rehearsal phase began. The math was ugly but clear. That evening, I watched Amber prepare for another rehearsal with new eyes. Every small detail that I'd missed before now seemed obvious. The way she checked her appearance twice in the hall mirror. The special attention to her hair and makeup for what should have been a casual community theater practice. The expensive-looking earrings I'd never seen before. "Blake's having us work on the big confrontation scene tonight," she said, gathering her things. "The one where Nora finally tells Torvald she's leaving." The irony was so perfect it was almost admirable. "Sounds intense," I said. "You've been practicing that scene a lot lately." "It's the climax of the whole play. Blake wants every moment to be absolutely truthful." She kissed me goodbye, a quick, distracted peck that felt more like obligation than affection. "Don't wait up. We might run late." After she left, I called the theater company she claimed to be working with. The receptionist was friendly and helpful. "A dollhouse? We're not currently producing that show. Our spring production was Steel Magnolias, which closed 2 weeks ago. We don't start summer rehearsals until July." "What about guest directors? Someone named Blake Harrison?" "I'm sorry, I don't recognize that name. Would you like me to check with our artistic director?" "No, that's okay. I must have been confused." Confused. That was one way to put it. I spent that evening documenting everything I could remember. The timeline of behavioral changes, the increase in evening absences, the new gym membership, the wardrobe updates, the networking events. Laid out chronologically, it painted a picture of someone methodically constructing a double life. But it was the rehearsal I'd witnessed that changed everything. This wasn't an impulsive affair or a sudden attraction that had spiraled out of control. This was planned, practiced, choreographed. She was rehearsing my heartbreak like a professional obligation. When Amber came home at nearly midnight, I was reading in bed, just as I had dozens of times before. "How was rehearsal?" I asked, not looking up from my book. "Emotionally exhausting," she said, heading straight for the bathroom. "Blake really pushed us tonight. Made us dig deep into the pain of the characters." The shower lasted 25 minutes. I could hear her through the door, still practicing. Different inflections, various emotional approaches, the same methodical work I'd seen in our living room. Except now I knew what she was really practicing for. The next week passed in a strange fog of normalcy. I went to Phoenix as scheduled. Amber continued her rehearsals, and we maintained the surface-level intimacy of our texts and brief phone calls. But underneath, I was conducting my own investigation. Kevin Murphy had been a lighting technician at the same theater where Amber and I had met. Now he ran a private investigation business that specialized in domestic cases. When I called him, he was sympathetic but professional. "Theater people," he said with a knowing sigh. "They make the best liars because they think of it as character work instead of deception. What do you need?" "Everything. Timeline, financial evidence, proof of the relationship, and I think she might be pregnant with his child." "How much do you want to know, Ryan? Sometimes it's better to just file for divorce and move on." "I want to know everything. She's been rehearsing how to leave me, Kevin, for months. This isn't just an affair, it's a production." He understood. Within a week, Kevin had built a case that would have impressed any forensic accountant. Hotel receipts, restaurant charges, credit card statements I'd never seen. Amber had been using an account I didn't know about, funded by money she'd been skimming from our joint savings. The timeline was devastating. 14 months of hotel stays, intimate dinners, weekend trips I'd thought were work conferences or theater workshops. She'd been building a relationship with Blake Harrison while actively deceiving me about where she was and what she was doing. But the pregnancy timeline was the worst part. According to the medical records Kevin obtained through legal channels, Amber was 10 weeks pregnant, well outside the window of our last intimate night together. She knew. She'd known when she took that pregnancy test 6 weeks ago, and she'd known when I watched her rehearse how to tell me about Blake and the baby. Kevin also discovered something that explained Blake's willingness to be involved with a married woman. Amber had told him I was abusive. According to Kevin's recordings of their conversations, Blake believed he was saving Amber from a controlling husband who monitored her activities and isolated her from her artistic pursuits. The irony was breathtaking. Blake thought he was the hero in this story. I decided to disrupt their narrative. Blake's office was in a sleek building near Cherry Creek, all glass and modern lines that screamed, "Successful real estate professional." I walked in without an appointment on a Thursday afternoon, carrying a tablet loaded with Kevin's evidence. "Mr. Harrison, I'm Ryan Fitzgerald. I think we need to talk about Amber." The color drained from his face so quickly I thought he might faint. I don't know what you're talking about." "Sure you do. She's told you all about her abusive husband who doesn't understand her artistic soul. The one she's planning to leave in a few months after she's saved enough money and rehearsed her exit speech enough times." I set the tablet on his desk and played 30 seconds of the video I'd taken through our living room window. Amber's voice filled his office. "Ryan, I'm leaving you for Blake. I've been planning this for over a year." Blake stared at the screen like it was showing footage of his own execution. "She's married," I said quietly. "To me. For 6 years. And she's pregnant with your child, though she hasn't figured out how to tell you that yet." "Pregnant?" His voice cracked. "She never... We've been careful. 10 weeks along. You can do the math." I pulled up Kevin's timeline of hotel receipts and restaurant charges. "This is 14 months of evidence. While you thought you were saving her from an abusive marriage, she was actually robbing our joint accounts to fund your relationship." Blake sat down heavily, staring at the evidence. "She said you were controlling, that you monitored her activities and tried to stop her from pursuing theater. I designed sets for the theater where we met. I've supported every play she's been in for 8 years. The only thing I ever controlled was the home security system." I showed him photos of our house, Amber's theatrical posters lining the hallways, the dedicated space I'd built for her scripts and costume storage, the framed reviews from her performances. "She's been lying to both of us, Blake. The difference is she's been practicing how to leave me for months. You're just finding out now that everything she told you was fiction." Blake's phone buzzed. A text from Amber. I could see enough of the preview to read, "Missing you today. Can't wait for tonight's rehearsal." "She's not in a play," I said. "There is no production of A Dollhouse." I checked with the theater company. "Her rehearsals have been dates with you." He stared at his phone like it had become a venomous snake. What do you want from me?" he asked finally. "Nothing. I just thought you should know who you've been sleeping with, and that she's carrying your child." I stood to leave, then paused at the door. "Oh, and Blake? You might want to ask yourself what story she'll rehearse to leave you when someone more interesting comes along." I had no idea whether Blake would confront Amber or just disappear. Either way, their little drama was about to change scripts dramatically. That evening, Amber prepared for another rehearsal with the same care she'd been taking for weeks. But something was different in her energy, more nervous, less confident. "Everything okay?" I asked as she checked her appearance in the hall mirror for the third time. "Just opening night jitters," she said. "Blake's been pushing us really hard and tonight's our first full run-through." "Well, you know what they say about opening nights." "What's that?" "Either everything goes perfectly or everything falls apart spectacularly." She laughed, but it sounded forced. "Hopefully it goes perfectly." 20 minutes later, my phone rang. Amber's ringtone. "Ryan?" Her voice was shaky, tears evident. Can you, can you come pick me up?" "Where are you?" "The Starbucks on 6th Avenue, near Blake's office." "I thought you were at rehearsal." A long pause. "There is no rehearsal. There never was. Can you just, please come get me?" I found her in the corner of the coffee shop, staring at an untouched latte with the kind of expression she'd worn when her mother died. Hollow, shocked, like someone had explained that gravity no longer worked. "What happened?" I asked, sitting across from her. "Blake broke up with me." Her voice was barely above a whisper. "He said he knew about you, about us being married, about—" She touched her stomach briefly. "About everything." "How did he find out?" She looked at me then, really looked at me, and I saw the moment she realized. "You told him." "I did." "How long have you known?" "I heard you rehearsing last Tuesday, when I came home early from Phoenix." The blood drained from her face. "You heard me. Practicing how to leave me. Multiple versions, different emotional approaches. Very thorough work." Amber closed her eyes. "Oh God. 10 weeks pregnant, Amber. 14 months of hotel receipts. An entire fictional theater production to cover your tracks." I kept my voice level, matter of fact. "You weren't just having an affair. You were producing it. I never meant for it to happen like this. You practiced it for months. You meant for it to happen exactly like this." She started crying then. Not the theatrical weeping I'd seen her use for dramatic roles, but the ugly, helpless sobbing of someone whose carefully constructed world had just collapsed. "Blake won't even talk to me anymore," she said between sobs. "He says I'm a liar and a manipulator, and that he can't trust anything I've ever told him." "Can he?" "I told him about the baby tonight. I thought, I thought if he knew we were going to have a family together." She wiped her nose with a coffee shop napkin. "He said he never wants to see me again." "What did you expect, Amber? You told him I was abusive. You made him complicit in breaking up a marriage based on lies. I had to make him understand why I couldn't just leave you immediately, why I needed time to plan. You needed time to steal money from our joint accounts and practice your exit speech." She flinched. "You know about the money, too." "I know about everything. Kevin Murphy is very thorough." "Kevin?" Her face went ashen. "You hired a private investigator?" "Former theater tech. He appreciates good documentation." We sat in silence for several minutes, surrounded by the ambient noise of coffee shop conversations and espresso machines. Finally, Amber spoke again. "What happens now?" "Now you have some choices to make. Blake's out of the picture, you're pregnant with his child, and I have enough evidence to make a divorce very expensive for you." "Are you divorcing me?" "Did you really think I wouldn't?" She started crying again. "I thought I could make it work. I thought I could have both. Security with you and passion with him." just until I figured out what I really wanted. And what do you really want, Amber? I don't know anymore. Blake was supposed to be my escape from ordinary life, from being married to someone who travels all the time and wants to have kids and live in suburbia forever. So you created a fantasy where you were the artistic heroine trapped by an unimaginative husband. It wasn't supposed to be fantasy. Blake was going to help me get connected with regional theater, maybe move to Chicago or New York. Blake sells houses, Amber. He has no theater connections. That was all part of the performance, too. The look on her face, the moment she realized that even her exit strategy had been built on lies, would have been pitiful if it hadn't been so deserved. I've ruined everything, haven't I? Completely. Is there any chance? Could we try counseling? Could we work through this? I looked at my wife, really looked at her. The woman who'd spent months practicing how to abandon me, who'd stolen money from our accounts to fund her affair, who'd gotten pregnant with another man's child while lying to both of us about her intentions. Amber, you rehearsed leaving me like it was a professional obligation. You practiced different ways to hurt me until you found the approach that felt right. That's not a mistake or a moment of weakness. That's systematic cruelty. I know it looks bad. It doesn't look bad. It is bad. There's a difference. She finished her latte in silence while I made mental notes about next steps. Divorce attorney, financial protection, custody arrangements for a child that wasn't mine, the practical concerns of untangling a life that someone else had systematically demolished. Can you drive me home? She asked finally. Of course. In the car, she made one more attempt. Ryan, I know I've screwed up everything, but could we at least try to end this amicably, for the sake of… She gestured vaguely toward her stomach. That depends. On what? On whether you're planning to rehearse this conversation too. She was quiet for the rest of the drive. The next morning, I called Patricia Wells, a divorce attorney Kevin had recommended. She specialized in complex asset division and prenuptial enforcement, exactly what I needed for someone who'd been skimming joint accounts for over a year. Bring me everything, Patricia said during our consultation. Financial records, the private investigator's report, any evidence of marital asset waste. Colorado law allows us to pursue reimbursement for money spent on the affair. How much trouble is she in? Legally, minimal, ethically? She's destroyed her credibility completely. That video of her rehearsing your divorce will be compelling evidence of premeditation if she tries to claim this was a sudden breakdown or temporary insanity. I handed over Kevin's meticulously documented evidence file. Hotel receipts totaling $7,200, restaurant charges of $3,400, jewelry purchases worth $4,200, travel expenses of $2,847, and miscellaneous gifts adding up to $400. Total marital waste, $18,047. This is excellent documentation, Patricia said, reviewing the financial summary. We can demand reimbursement for all of this plus legal fees. The pregnancy complicates things. She'll likely claim financial hardship, but the systematic nature of the spending works in your favor. What about the house? Yours. You can prove you paid for the down payment and improvements from your separate accounts before the marriage. She'll have a claim on equity appreciation, but given the marital waste, it should offset. And custody of the child? Patricia's expression softened slightly. That's not your concern, Ryan. The child isn't biologically yours, and you're not married to her when it's born. Unless you want to pursue step-parent adoption, which I strongly advise against, you have no legal obligations. She doesn't have anywhere to go. Her job's in jeopardy, Blake's gone, and her parents live in Kansas. That's unfortunate. but it's not your responsibility to solve. She created this situation through deliberate choices made over 14 months. The consequences are hers to manage. When I got home that evening, Amber was sitting in our living room, the same room where I'd watched her rehearse my abandonment, surrounded by boxes. "Packing already?" I asked. "Patricia Wells called me today," she said without looking up. "She explained your terms for the divorce settlement. And I can't afford to fight it. I can't afford anything, actually. Blake and we spent more than I realized." I sat in the chair across from her, the same spot where I'd unknowingly been an audience to her practice sessions. "Where will you go?" "My parents, I guess. Mom's not thrilled about me coming home pregnant and divorced, but she says I can stay until the baby's born." "What about work?" Amber's face crumpled. Blake was a client, a major client. When HR found out about our relationship, they put me on administrative leave pending a full investigation. Conflict of interest and professional ethics violation, they called it. Will you lose your job? Probably. Corporate communications directors don't usually survive ethics investigations, especially when the conflict of interest resulted in pregnancy. The irony was perfect. Amber had traded our marriage for a fantasy relationship with someone who'd ultimately cost her everything: her husband, her lover, her career, her financial security. "I'm sorry it worked out this way," I said, and meant it. "Are you?" "I'm sorry you made choices that led to this outcome. I'm not sorry you're facing consequences for those choices." She taped up another box with more force than necessary. "Blake really never had any theater connections, did he?" "No, that was just part of his sales pitch." God, I'm such an idiot. "You're not an idiot, Amber. You're someone who got so wrapped up in creating a dramatic narrative that you forgot to check whether any of it was real." She looked at me then with something that might have been recognition. "You always did understand me better than I understood myself. Not well enough to see this coming? I made sure you couldn't. I got very good at performing the wife you expected to see." And there it was, the final admission. Not just that she'd had an affair, but that our entire marriage had become a performance for her. I'd been living with an actress playing the role of my wife. Amber finished packing that weekend. I helped her load the moving truck, even paid for it. One last gesture of support for someone who'd systematically dismantled our life together. "Take care of yourself," I said, as she prepared to drive away. "You too." She paused with her hand at the truck door. "For what it's worth, Ryan, I did love you, at least at first." "I know, I loved you too. All of you, even the parts you were hiding. That's why this is so awful. You deserved better than what I gave you." "Yes, I did." She drove away on a Tuesday morning in late May, exactly 3 weeks after I discovered her rehearsing my abandonment. The house felt enormous and quiet without her theatrical energy filling the spaces. That evening, I did something I hadn't done in months. I cooked dinner for myself and ate it at our dining room table while reading a book that had nothing to do with cybersecurity or divorce proceedings. For the first time in weeks, I felt like I could breathe normally. 3 months later, Patricia called with an update. Amber's attorney wants to renegotiate the financial settlement. She's claiming hardship due to pregnancy complications and unemployment. What kind of complications? Bed rest for the last trimester. Her parents are supporting her, but they're retired and it's straining their resources. What does she want? Reduction in the marital waste reimbursement. She's offering to pay back $10,000 instead of $18,000. And in exchange, She waives all claims to the house and any future alimony considerations. I thought about it for exactly 30 seconds. Counteroffer, 12,000, paid over 2 years, and she signs a non-disclosure agreement about the affair and pregnancy. She'll take it. She did. 6 months after our divorce was finalized, I ran into Blake Harrison at a restaurant in Cherry Creek. He was with a woman who looked nothing like Amber. Older, more professional, someone who probably didn't need to be saved from anything. "Ryan," he said awkwardly when our eyes met. I want you to know how sorry I am about everything that happened." "How are you doing, Blake?" "Better. A lot better, actually." He glanced at his companion, who was discreetly checking her phone. "I learned some things about myself through that whole situation. About what I was really looking for." "And what was that?" "Drama, I think. Amber made me feel like I was the hero in some romantic story. But real life isn't a story, is it? Not usually, no. For what it's worth, I never meant to hurt your marriage. She told me." "I know what she told you. None of it was your fault." Relief flickered across his face. "Thank you for saying that. And for telling me the truth when you did. It would have been a lot worse if I'd found out later. Take care of yourself, Blake." We shook hands like two people who'd survived the same natural disaster. In a way, I suppose we had. That fall, I started volunteering at the community theater again. Not designing sets this time. I wasn't ready for that level of commitment, but helping with basic construction and maintenance. It felt good to work with my hands on something creative, to be around people who were passionate about storytelling for its own sake, rather than as a tool for deception. "You're the guy whose wife ran off with that real estate agent, aren't you?" asked Martha Goldstein, the theater's longtime costume coordinator, while we were painting flats for their production of Our Town. News travels fast in theater communities. "Something like that," I said. "She always was a bit too performative for my taste. Even in normal conversation, you know? Like she was always auditioning for something." I'd never thought of it that way, but Martha was right. Amber had approached every interaction like a performance opportunity. "Some people just have that theatrical nature," I said diplomatically. "There's a difference between being theatrical and being fake, honey. Theatrical people are big personalities who feel everything intensely. Fake people use performance to hide who they really are." It was a distinction I wished I'd understood 6 years earlier. That winter, I met Hannah Brooks at a bookstore coffee shop. She was reading a novel I'd loved, and we ended up talking for 2 hours about authors and travel and the peculiar satisfaction of solving complex problems. She dealt with pediatric cases. I dealt with cybersecurity threats. "What's the most interesting case you've worked on recently?" she asked during our third coffee date. "Industrial espionage investigation. Turned out the security breach was coming from inside the company, an employee selling access to competitors." "How did you figure it out?" "Pattern recognition, mostly. The unauthorized access attempts had a specific timing that corresponded with one person's work schedule. Plus, they were too sophisticated to be external hackers, but too clumsy to be professionals." Hannah nodded thoughtfully. "It's always the people closest to you who can do the most damage, isn't it? They know exactly where your vulnerabilities are." It was an observation that hit a little too close to home, but coming from her, it felt like wisdom rather than pain. "What about you?" I asked. "Most interesting case?" 8-year-old boy whose parents were convinced he had ADHD. Turns out he was acting out because his mother was having an affair, and he could sense the tension in the house even though no one was talking about it. Kids pick up on everything. What happened? I recommended family therapy. The parents ended up getting divorced, but they handled it honestly this time. The boys' behavior problems disappeared once everyone stopped pretending everything was fine. Sometimes the truth is kinder than the performance. Almost always, in my experience. Hannah and I took things slowly. She knew about my divorce, though not all the details, and she never pushed for more information than I was comfortable sharing. It was refreshing to be with someone who didn't need drama or narrative complexity to feel engaged in a relationship. "You're very peaceful," she said one evening as we were making dinner together in my kitchen. "Is that good or bad?" "Good, very good. I spent my 20s dating men who thought conflict was the same thing as passion. Turns out I prefer kindness." "Me too." We were engaged 8 months later, not because we needed to make grand romantic gestures, but because we'd discovered we genuinely enjoyed building a life together. The wedding was small and simple, held at the same community theater where Amber and I had met. Martha Goldstein helped design Hannah's dress, and Kevin Murphy, now a friend rather than a private investigator, photographed the ceremony. "Any pre-wedding jitters?" Kevin asked while we were getting ready. "None. Should there be?" Most grooms are nervous about something. The commitment, the ceremony, whether they're making the right choice. I thought about it seriously. I'm not nervous about any of those things. Hannah and I have been living together for 6 months. We've seen each other deal with stress, sickness, family drama, work problems. I know who she is. And who is she? Someone who doesn't need to rehearse being herself. A year after Hannah and I were married, I received an unexpected letter forwarded through Patricia Wells' office. Amber had given birth to a daughter and wanted to share some closure thoughts, now that the baby was healthy and her life had stabilized. The letter was classic Amber, dramatic, self-reflective, with just enough vulnerability to elicit sympathy without quite taking full responsibility. Ryan. I know I have no right to contact you, but becoming a mother has given me perspective on how badly I damage the people I claim to love. I've spent the last year in therapy working through why I made the choices I did, and I wanted to share some insights in case they help you heal. I realize now that I was so afraid of being ordinary that I created extraordinary drama to make myself feel special. The affair wasn't really about Blake or about you. It was about the story I told myself about being trapped in a conventional life. Blake was just as much a victim of my deception as you were. I used both of you to create a narrative where I was the misunderstood heroine instead of taking responsibility for my own dissatisfaction with choices I'd made. I know this doesn't excuse anything, but I wanted you to know that I understand the damage I caused. You deserved honesty, and I gave you performance. You deserved partnership, and I gave you manipulation. I'm raising Emma, I named her after your grandmother, if that's okay, as a single mother in Kansas. My parents have been supportive, and I have a job at the local community college teaching communication skills. It's not the dramatic life I thought I wanted, but it's real in a way my life with you never was. I hope you're happy, Ryan. You were always too good with the way I treated you. Amber. Hannah found me reading the letter in our kitchen the next morning. "News from your ex?" she asked, pouring coffee. "She had the baby, a daughter. Named her Emma, after my grandmother. How do you feel about that?" I considered the question carefully. Grateful that she's healthy. Sad that Amber still doesn't quite understand what she did wrong. and mostly relieved that it's all really over. What doesn't she understand? She talks about being afraid of ordinary life, but our life wasn't ordinary. We traveled, we were involved in theater, we had interesting careers and good friends. She was just so focused on creating drama that she couldn't see the actual adventure we were living. Hannah sat next to me at our kitchen table, the same table where Amber had once sat practicing her exit speeches. Some people mistake intensity for intimacy, Hannah said. They think if there's no conflict or crisis, there's no real connection. Is that a professional observation or personal experience? Both. I used to think the same way, actually. It took me a while to realize that drama isn't the same thing as depth. And what's the difference? Drama is about performance. Depth is about truth. That afternoon, I wrote back to Amber, the first communication we'd had since the divorce. Amber, thank you for writing. I'm glad Emma is healthy and that you found stability. I appreciate your perspective on what happened, though I think you're still missing something important. Our life together wasn't a trap, it was a foundation. The problem wasn't that it was ordinary. The problem was that you convinced yourself it wasn't enough. I hope you find peace with the choices you're making now. Emma is lucky to have a mother who's committed to being honest with her. Take care. Ryan. P.S. Yes, it's okay that you named her Emma. My grandmother would have been honored. I never heard from Amber again. 2 years later, Hannah and I had our own daughter, Sophie. Watching Hannah navigate new motherhood, the genuine exhaustion, the fierce protectiveness, the overwhelming love, made me realize how much of Amber's pregnancy must have been performed for Blake and me rather than actually experienced. Do you think about Amber much? Hannah asked one evening while we were giving Sophie her bath. Not really. Why? Just wondering if you ever compare us. I looked at my wife, hair pulled back in a messy ponytail, no makeup, wearing a shirt covered in baby food stains, completely absorbed in making sure our daughter was safe and happy, and felt the same peaceful contentment I'd felt every day since we'd been together. There's nothing to compare, I said. You're not playing a role. You're just you. Is that enough? It's everything. 5 years after my divorce from Amber, Kevin Murphy called with an update I hadn't requested. Blake Harrison's getting married, he said without preamble. Okay, why are you telling me this? Because his fiancée hired me to do a background check, and your name came up in my report. She wanted to know if he was trustworthy. And? I told her he'd been deceived by a married woman who lied about her situation, that he ended the relationship immediately when he learned the truth, and that I'd never seen him do anything deliberately harmful. That's fair. She also asked if I thought he'd learned from the experience. What did you tell her? That people who've been burned by liars usually get very good at recognizing authenticity. Blake's going to be fine. I hoped that was true. Blake had been a victim of Amber's performance too, just from a different angle. How's the family? Kevin asked. Good. Sophie's starting kindergarten next month. Hannah's been promoted to head of pediatrics at Presbyterian. And you? I'm installing security systems for a chain of art galleries. Turns out there's real satisfaction in protecting beautiful things. Sounds like you landed on your feet. It took a while, but yeah. That evening, I told Hannah about Kevin's call. Do you think Blake will be happy? She asked. I think he'll be honest, which is a good start. What about Amber? Do you ever wonder how she's doing? I considered the question while watching Sophie build an elaborate castle with her blocks. The same focused concentration I brought to my work. The same creative problem-solving Hannah used with her patients. I hope she's learned to be satisfied with real life instead of constantly auditioning for something better. That's very generous of you. It's not generous, it's practical. Emma deserves a mother who's present instead of performing. Hannah nodded and went back to reading her medical journal. After 7 years together, we'd learned to have these conversations without drama or extensive processing. Just the exchange of thoughts between two people who trusted each other completely. Last month, Sophie came home from school with an assignment to interview a family member about a time when they learned something important. "What did you learn, Daddy?" she asked, setting up her little recorder with the seriousness of a professional journalist. "I learned the difference between someone who loves you and someone who's practicing how to love you." "What's the difference?" "Someone who loves you wants to know who you really are. Someone who's practicing wants you to be the character they need for their story." Sophie nodded solemnly and wrote this down in her notebook. "Which kind of person is Mommy?" "The first kind. Definitely the first kind." "Good," Sophie said, clicking off her recorder. "I like Mommy better when she's not practicing." It occurred to me that my 5-year-old daughter had just articulated something it had taken me 6 years of marriage to understand. That night, after Sophie was asleep, Hannah and I sat on our back porch watching the stars. "Do you think we'll tell Sophie about Amber someday?" Hannah asked. "Probably, when she's old enough to understand the complexity." "What will you tell her?" "That I was married before to someone who didn't know how to be honest about what she wanted. That sometimes people create drama because they think it's more interesting than contentment. And that real love doesn't require rehearsal." "Think she'll understand?" "She's your daughter. She'll understand the difference between what's real and what's performance." Hannah smiled and took my hand. "She's your daughter too." "Yeah, she is." We sat in comfortable silence, listening to the night sounds of our neighborhood. Somewhere in Kansas, Amber was probably tucking Emma into bed, perhaps reading her a story about princesses and adventures. Somewhere in Denver, Blake was likely planning a wedding with someone who didn't need to be rescued from anything. And here, in the life I'd built with Hannah, Sophie was dreaming whatever dreams 5-year-olds have. Probably something involving castles and dragons and happy endings that don't require anyone to rehearse their lines. It had taken me almost a decade to understand that the best stories don't feel like stories when you're living them. They feel like Tuesday evenings and shared grocery lists and conversations about everything and nothing. They feel like someone knowing exactly how you take your coffee and never having to pretend you're someone else. They feel like home. 10 years after I discovered Amber rehearsing my abandonment, I was designing the set for our community theater's production of A Dollhouse, the same play she'd claimed to be in during her months of deception. "Interesting choice," Martha Goldstein commented as I sketched out the living room where Nora would deliver her famous final monologue. "It seemed time," I said. "Not too close to home?" "Not anymore." I'd volunteered for the production specifically because I wanted to see how the story felt when it was performed honestly. Watching our actress, a genuine community theater volunteer named Carol, who taught high school English during the day, inhabit Nora's journey of self-discovery was revelatory. When performed authentically, Nora's decision to leave Torvald wasn't cruel or manipulative. It was the painful but necessary choice of someone who'd realized she'd been living as a character in someone else's story rather than as herself. The difference between Nora and Amber was that Nora left to discover who she really was. Amber left because she'd convinced herself that being someone else would be more interesting. During the final dress rehearsal, Carol delivered Nora's closing lines with a conviction that raised goosebumps on my arms. I believe that I am first and foremost a human being, like you, or at any rate that I must try to become one. It was the line Amber had never understood. She'd been so focused on becoming more dramatic, more interesting, more special, that she'd forgotten to work on becoming more real. After the show closed, Hannah and I went out for dinner with the cast and crew, the same restaurant where Amber and I used to celebrate opening nights. How did it feel, working on that particular play? Hannah asked as we walked to our car. Cathartic, I think, like finishing a conversation that got interrupted. And what was the conclusion? That some people leave because they need to find themselves, and others leave because they've lost themselves. The difference matters. Which was Amber? Lost. Definitely lost. When we got home, Sophie was waiting up with her babysitter, excited to hear about the play. Was it good, Daddy? It was honest. That's the best thing a story can be. Better than exciting? Much better. Exciting stories end when the excitement stops. Honest stories keep going even after the curtain falls. Sophie nodded like this made perfect sense, which maybe it did to someone who'd never learned to mistake performance for reality. That night, as I was turning off the lights in our living room, the same room where I'd once watched my first wife rehearse destroying our marriage, I felt something I'd never expected to feel about that experience. Gratitude. Not gratitude for the pain or the betrayal or the months of uncertainty, but gratitude for the clarity. Amber's deception had taught me to recognize authenticity when I found it. Her performance had helped me understand the value of someone who didn't need to rehearse being herself. Without Amber's elaborate fiction, I might never have fully appreciated Hannah's simple truth. In the end, that was the story worth telling. Not the dramatic collapse of a marriage built on lies, but the quiet construction of a life built on honesty. Not the woman who practiced leaving, but the woman who chose to stay. Not the performance that ended in disaster, but the reality that continued to unfold, one genuine moment at a time. The curtain had fallen on Amber's drama years ago, but the story Hannah and I were writing together, Sophie's story, our family's story, the simple tale of people who'd chosen to love each other without pretense. That story was still being written. And unlike the performance I'd discovered through our living room window on that Tuesday afternoon in May, this story didn't need any rehearsal at all.